How do we stop seeking our validation from other people? How do we stop proving our worth before anyone will trust us? And I think rejection can actually become a doorway if God steps into the story. And in Judges chapter 11, we're going to unpack Jephthah's rise from the margins, his desperate negotiations, his vow, and the painful cost of trying to secure victory on human terms. And I'll give you one immediate action to help you stop making frantic promises when pressure rises in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps you out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. Okay, so Judges chapter 11 is going to tell the story of Jephthah, a rejected son from Gilead who becomes Israel's deliverer against Ammon. The elders come to him in crisis. Jephthah argues his case, sends a diplomatic message, and then makes a vow before battle, and God grants him victory. But the chapter turns tragic when Jephthah's vow collides with the return of his daughter. So the chapter is about God using the rejected, but also the danger of speaking rashly under pressure. So let's read verses 1 to 11 now. The focus here is going to be Jephthah's rejection and then him being called back. And my question to you is, why does the story begin with exclusion before deliverance? Verse 1, Now Jephthah, the Gileadite, the son of a prostitute, was a mighty warrior. Gilead was the father of Jephthah. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah away, saying to him, You shall not inherit anything in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman. Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Outlaws gathered around Jephthah and went raiding with him. After a time, the Ammonites made war against Israel, and when the Ammonites made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah from the land of Tob. They said to Jephthah, Come and be our commander, so that we may fight with the Ammonites. But Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, Are you not the very ones who rejected me and drove me out of my father's house? So why do you come to me now when you are in trouble? The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, Nevertheless, we have now turned back to you so that you may go with us and fight with the Ammonites and become head over us, over all the inhabitants of Gilead. Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, If you bring me home again to fight with the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them over to me, I will be your head. And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, The Lord will be witness between us, we will surely do as you say. So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. Alright, so why does the chapter begin with Jephthah's humiliation? Because God delivers in places where people are wounded. So God's deliverers often come from very difficult situations. Jephthah is the son of a prostitute and is driven away by his brothers. Yet when trouble comes, the elders seek him out. And the chapter shows that social rejection does not cancel out or does not preclude you from being useful to God. God can turn the one cast out into the one who saves, and God's grace is especially visible where human status has failed. So rejection is not the same as disqualification, especially when you're rejected by men and God can accept you. Okay, now let's read verses 12 to 28. The focus here is going to be Jephthah's diplomatic appeal to the king of Ammon. And my question to you is, why does Jephthah argue history before going to war? Verse 12. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said, Where is there between you and me that you have come to fight against my land? The king of the Ammonites answered the messengers of Jephthah, Because Israel, on coming from Egypt, took away my land from the Ammon to the Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now, therefore, restore it peaceably. Once again, Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said to him, Thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites, but when they came up from Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea, and came to Kadesh. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Let us pass through your land." But the king of Edom would not listen. They also sent to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel remained at Kadesh. Then they journeyed through the wilderness, went around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, arrived on the east side of the land of Moab, and camped on the other side of the Arnon. They did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the boundary of Moab. Israel then sent messengers to King Sihon of the Amorites, king of Heshbon, and Israel said to him, "Let us pass through your land to our country." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, so Sihon gathered all his people together and encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. Then the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel occupied all the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country. They occupied all the territory of the Amorites from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. So now the Lord, the God of Israel, has conquered the Amorites for the benefit of his people. Do you intend to take their place? Should you not possess what your god Shemosh gives you to possess? And should we not be the ones to possess everything that the Lord our God has conquered for our benefit? Now, are you any better than King Balak, son of Zippor of Moab? Did he ever enter into conflict with Israel, or did he ever go to war with them? While Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and in Aroer and its villages, and in all the towns that are along the Arnon, 300 years, why did you not recover them within that time? It is not I who have sinned against you, but you are the one who does me wrong by making war on me. Let the Lord, who is judge, decide today for the Israelites or for the Ammonites. But the king of the Ammonites did not heed the message that Jephthah sent him. Okay, so why does Jephthah argue about history before going to war? I think it's important to remember that this is not an aggression in a militaristic sense. It is a dispute over covenant memory and territory. So Jephthah rehearses Israel's history, goes through everything that the Lord has done for Israel, the deliverance from Egypt, Balaam, and the land, to show that Ammon's claim is not grounded in truth, and he's trying to settle the matter with words before blood. You'll notice that he stays firm in his beliefs throughout this engagement, throughout this encounter. He tells the truth, he uses careful reasoning, he doesn't back down on his beliefs, but he tries to seek diplomacy before battling. And he knows that history is on his side. That's why he's so confident when he's speaking. He uses his memory, he uses the history as a weapon against false claims. So Jephthah is not merely angry, he's trying to show that God gave the land to Israel and that the land belongs to the covenant story. So this is important. However, King Ammon, right, or king of Ammon, ignores the argument. He rejects it because pride is hard to persuade. Once power has decided what it wants, it's difficult to sway a person one way or the other. So the chapter actually sets up a tragedy. A good argument can be made, but stubbornness can still push people towards war. Okay, let's read verses 29 to 40. This is going to be Jephthah's vow, the victory, and the tragedy that follows. So, my question to you is, why does a vow made in faith become so destructive? Verse 29, Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh. He passed on to Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return victorious from the Ammonites, shall be the Lord's, to be offered up by me as a burnt offering. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. He inflicted a massive defeat on them, from Aroer to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 towns, and as far as Abel Keramim. So the Ammonites were subdued before the Israelites. Verse 34, Then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah, and there was his daughter coming out to meet him, with timbrels and with dancing. She was his only child. He had no son or daughter except her. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You have become the cause of great trouble to me, for I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow. She said to him, My father, if you have opened your mouth to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has given you vengeance against your enemies, the Ammonites. And she said to her father, Let this thing be done for me. Grant me 2 months so that I may go and wander the mountains and bewail my virginity, my companions and I. Go, he said, and he sent her away for 2 months. So she departed, she and her companions, and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. At the end of 2 months she returned to her father, who did with her according to the vow he had made. She had never slept with a man, so there arose an Israelite custom that for 4 days every year the daughters of Israel would go out to lament the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. Alright, a very dramatic story here. Why does Jephthah even make such a vow? Okay, the reason why is because he's fearful and he's trying to secure God's help by bargaining. So the vow actually sounds pious, but it reveals some anxiety. He's not simply trusting God's promise. And the chapter actually shows the danger of trying to control God through his rash speech. And this is important because vows which are made in panic are actually spiritually risky. And it shows that even that pressure can even turn devotion into a bargaining. And the vow is so tragic because it shows something important. It intersects with the first thing that comes out to meet him, his daughter. Usually in the ancient world, like an animal would come to meet him, or maybe a dog would come and meet him. A dog would come and greet him. But the story is gut-wrenching because the vow is made in the language of devotion, but it produces loss and grief. So the chapter, it actually doesn't celebrate this vow. It shows and exposes the cost of careless speech before God. So holiness must be governed by wisdom, and religious words do not excuse reckless promises. And what is the main lesson of the daughter's response? The biblical story here gives her dignity and courage because she accepts the tragedy with grief, not confusion, and asks for time to lament her virginity with her companions. And the chapter leaves it leaves us with sorrow, right? It's not easy because there aren't any easy answers here. But it wants us to feel how destructive this vow can be when it is made without discernment, okay? So grief here is a truthful response to brokenness, and if we lament, that is appropriate because this should cause us a little bit of pain and strife. So, how should we understand this ending? It's not teaching that God desired human sacrifice as a norm, obviously. In fact, human sacrifice is condemned by the Bible. It shows something. It shows that the calamity of rash vows is so tragic in the ancient Near East context. And the focus here is the cost of Jephthah's speech, not praising it. And we also see that there is an annual remembrance for the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. So she is kept in public memory. So such stories are warnings against disordered zeal. Okay, let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. Judges chapter 11 shows that God can use the rejected, but also that human striving and fearful bargaining can lead to sorrow. And in Christ, the story is completely transformed. Jesus is the rejected one who also becomes the deliverer, yet he never makes a reckless vow to force the Father's hand. Instead, he gives himself willingly in perfect trust and brings salvation without any form of manipulation. Jephthah's tragedy deepens our gratitude for a Savior whose obedience is pure and whose deliverance is not built on panic, as we read in James chapter 1 verse 5. If any of you is lacking in wisdom, ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given you. The idea here is that when you're under pressure, we must pray, ask for wisdom instead of making rash vows, and God will give abundantly to all of us. Okay, so how can we apply this chapter in our everyday life? I think the first thing is that we need to pray. Pray James chapter 1 verse 5. If any of you is lacking in wisdom, ask God who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to you. So pray it slowly and ask God for wisdom before you speak. And the second thing is you need to stop making rash decisions, rash vows, saying careless things. We need to pray and have discernment when we say things, when we make promises. And we need to ask whether it needs to be kept, whether it needs to be clarified, or whether it needs to be confessed as something which is rash, because it can have drastic consequences. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Remember that. Alright, so that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. Next time we move from Jephthah's tragic vow to the conflict in Judges chapter 12. We'll unpack Ephraim's complaint, the cost of tribal pride, and how words can become weapons inside God's people. You don't want to miss it. So in this episode we learned that Jephthah is rejected, then called when crisis hits. He argues from history before he goes to war. His vow reveals fear, not just faith. The vow's tragedy is the result of reckless speech before God, and the chapter is a warning against trying to control outcomes through pious-sounding promises. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.